Yo, welcome back everyone. Daniel here again with another Final Fantasy TCG deck video. This time I'm going to be doing a deck that I really enjoy, I really like to play, and it's always been fun for me. This is going to be the Final Fantasy 13 Fire Ice deck. I know this deck usually is played like Fire Lightning, just to be more aggressive. This one is still just as aggressive. You're going to be playing just mainly 13 forwards, and then your backup line is pretty condensed of just cards that can allow you to play other cards or just like 13 backups. So, getting into the deck here, we've got 23 forwards, 11 summons, and 16 backups. The summon count does seem a bit high in this deck, although each summon in this deck has a specific purpose, and they're all extremely powerful to get. The 16 backups can be played around with. You typically don't need 16. You could play this on 15 or 14 backups. Um, but it depends on how aggressive you want to be, so you could always change the summon and the backup count depending on your build and how you want to play. But yeah, let's go into the cards that I'm playing. To start us off, as usual, I'm playing three copies of the Opus 18 Rare Fang. This card is incredibly amazing for 13 decks. If you have more than 3 Category 13 characters, all your 13 forwards gain 2k power. So she even counts herself, so you just need like 2 backups in her, or you could just play like 3 backups and then be fine with that. She also has a 0 cost action, which reduces the cost of your next 13 forward by 2. This is extremely good. It makes your Lightning 1 cost. It makes Vanille 1 cost. We have Caius in the deck. He is going to be a 2 cost with this effect. The starter deck Snow from the dual decks is going to be a 2 cost. And then we have Noel, even though he's off color, you can still play him for 3. You can also make the LB Snow 3, so that's another good thing in the deck. Other than that, moving on to our next card, and probably the key piece of the deck. This is literally what makes this deck so aggressive and so hard hitting. It's going to be the starter deck Opus 19 Lightning from the dual decks. We play this at 3 copies. You want to max this out card immediately when you're building your 13 decks. This is probably going to be your key forward. So she has haste, and then she has a really interesting line of text. So when one or more 13 character attacks, all the forwards you control gain 1k power till the end of the turn. Then, if 2 or more attack, you draw a card. If 3 or more attack, she'll deal 1 point of damage to the opponent. So each of these are auto triggers when a 13 forward attacks. What's cool about this is that it doesn't say it's once per turn. And also, every time a 13 forward attacks, you do the first line of text, then the second line of text, and then once the third one attacks, you do all 3, and then you'll keep doing it every time a 13 forward attacks. So if you can get out, like turn 1, Vanille Fang, right? And then your turn 2 looks something like a lightning into either like Knoll, if you can play it, or like, let's say Caius into Jill, you can really swarm out the field and then just be like, well, I'm going to game you in like 2, 3 turns. Like, you better respond to this. And then her just buffing power on swing, combine that with Fang's like field effect of just giving the 2k for having, 13 forwards. For having 3 or more 13 characters, I mean, sorry. She can make herself 10k. She makes Vanille 10k, so that's always pretty cool. But moving right along, we play 2 copies of Opus 24 Lightning. You don't need this in your deck. I play it because it's a good, like, just sort of stally card just to get yourself resituated. Uh, they will probably try and kill your light lightning here, so having this lightning just be in your hand and being like, well, I can do the thing of remove her, and then reveal this lightning, play it, and then, block with it, and then remove their forward and bounce her back to my hand. It's pretty nice. Her text is when lightning blocks or is blocked, choose one attacking or blocking forward the opponent controls, remove it from the game, and return lightning to hand. She has a one cost ability when you reveal her from your hand, you remove a lightning in your break zone, and you play her onto the field. So this is really good on your opponent's attack step. When they're attacking with stuff, you can choose to use the lightning effect, remove the light lightning, or one of the copies of the earth lightning, play it. Pretty good defensively, so it just helps you keep up pressure and allows you to at least stay in the game. Next up, we have 3 copies of Vanille from the Opus 19 starter deck as well. This card is your main search tool. She's an EX Burst searcher. She can search for Lightning, Fang, or Hope. We don't play Hope in this deck, unfortunately. All of the Hope cards are Wind, and there was really no space for him. Most of them aren't that useful. There's like the Lightning Hope from the same starter deck, but we aren't playing Lightning either. She also has a S ability, which during this turn, if your opponent's forward is dealt damage, that damage gets doubled. She also deals 2k damage to all the opponent's forwards, so she essentially does 4k damage. Pretty nice. It can combo decently with Susano if you need to really board wipe. There's just a ton of other cards. You could play this with like Brynhilders, and I'm running Bahamut. At that point, it's overkill, but even just her doing 4k to the board is pretty nice, especially if you have 3 copies of her. You can pretty much wipe the board with her. Next up, you don't have to run this card. I run it because it's a 13 forward, and it's pretty cheap. It's an ice. So this is Jill Nabat from Opus 20. She has kind of weird text. She's more of a mono ice card, but again, since I'm playing a sort of 13-esque core deck, I'm just using her just as a card that I can play. Her text is if all the characters you control are ice, she gains 2k power, so she becomes 9k if you only have ice cards. She also has, when she is put from the field to the break zone, you can pay 2 ice. When you do, choose 2 characters, don't freeze them. This is pretty decent early if you see it early. If you have 2 ice backups set up and she's played on turn 2, that's pretty fine. 9k at turn 2 is pretty nice. But again, as soon as you play any of your fire characters or light lightning, she'll lose the 2k. So, but she's still fine with Fang here. Fang will still give her the 2k. You don't really need her to be like super huge. You just want her to be another body that can attack. Next up, we are playing the Opus 10 Caius. I personally like this card because on my early turns, I can actually play this Caius down and either set a backup to search a card or set a backup to, basically I go Caius, play Edgar, play Lightning or Fang, or a backup. So this one card could turn into potentially 2 cards played during the turn, or 3, depending on which 3-drop you play. His text is when he enters the field, play 1 character of a cost 3 or less from your hand. And then when Caius is put from the field to the break zone, you select the character you control, put it into the break zone. So this could be useful with Jill Nabat again. So you can do things like play Caius, play Jill Nabat, pitch a card for Lightning, and then if your opponent deals with Caius, you can just potentially kill your own Jill Nabat to basically go, I'll kill Jill Nabat, pay the 2 ice, and then dull freeze 2 of your characters, like 2 of your backups or something like that, so Lightning could keep swinging and being safe. I play this at 1 copy because you only really need to see it once. You don't really need multiple copies of this card. And if you do want to play multiple copies of this card, you could just take out the Jill Nabat. Jill Nabat's also at 1 copy, so, they're interchangeable. But next up, I am also playing 2 copies of Opus 10 starter deck Terra. This card is extremely good. We are playing 11 summons, and she can recur a summon. She's an EX burst that recurs a summon from your hand when she enters the field. And then when you cast the summon, you choose 1 forward and deal it 2k, so she can potentially make this Ama a 10k Ama. She can make essentially this Bahamut B12. Because Bahamut here will deal 10 and then shield deal 2, Amma will deal 8, and then, shield deal 2. This could be useful with a lot of cards. Again, Brynhildr is another, like, summon you could play instead of, maybe you don't want to play 3 Mateus, maybe you don't want to play Shiva. You can play Brynhildr in those slots, and Brynhildr will 5k ping, something. Terra will make it 2. If you use Vanille S ability, it just goes up from there. Next up, one copy of Opus 16 Shantoto. This card is mainly just to recur me a character. So if your opponent has one card or less in their hand, she is reduced by 3, so she essentially becomes a 1-drop. And then when she enters the field, you choose one character other than Shantoto, and you add it to hand. She also has a 1 ice, 1 anything, and pay a crystal, remove Shantoto from your hand, and dull all the forwards the opponent controls. You can only use this while she's in your hand. We aren't playing crystals, so we don't really care for this. We mainly want her to recur a character. This is another card you can play at A2 if you didn't want to play Jill Nabat or Caius. So it's another just good card to recur you stuff. Next up, we have the Opus 19 starter deck Snow from the dual decks. This is a pretty good card. So if you control Lightning, Snow and Lightning can't be chosen by your opponent's summons. And then when he enters the field, you can select one of the following. Your opponent discards 1 card. And then if you have Sarah, you can choose 3 characters the opponent controls and dull and freeze them. So this is really good with this Sarah backup here. This will basically make Snow untargetable, since he will become untargetable by summons, and then if you have Lightning, and then Sarah here protects him via abilities. But yeah, this is a really strong card. You're probably not going to really use the, discard one. Your deck's not really heavy discard, but if you ever do want to make your opponent discard, it's something you can do. He is just a good, strong body to have out. Next up is the second off-colored card, essentially, is going to be Null here from Opus 23. You may be wondering, why am I playing this? It's not like the Lightning. She can't be, basically colorless. This card is played because I'm playing the Class 9th Moogle, which is an ice backup that taps for wind as well. So, I'm running 3 copies of the Null here, also because Fang can make him reduced by 2, so he costs 3. So if I ever end up with 2 Nulls in hand and Fang on the board, I can just hard play the card for 3. He does have haste first strike. He also has warp. And then his effect is, at the beginning of the attack step, remove a warp counter for each 13 character you control. Now, since he's warp 3, I only need either 2 forwards and a backup, or just 3 forwards or 2 forwards, 1 backup, to essentially make him, basically free. And since our deck mainly has 13 forwards and some 13 backups, he's always essentially going to just be around that free range of, I just paid 1 wind, which isn't too difficult. And also he's a 9k body that's just, haste first strike is really strong. So you can do a lot of cool stuff with Null and Lightning. This is a pretty much guaranteed, I'm doing at least 2 to 3 damage this turn, depending on when Lightning was played in the game. If you play Lightning on turn 2 after playing a Vanille Fang, this essentially wins you the game. So, it's pretty nice. Our last card again is going to be Susano from Opus 14. He has haste. When he enters the field, you put one of your backups and remove it from the game. And then, you put a backup into your break zone, sorry. I haven't used this card in forever. You pretty much break your backup, and then you 9k the board, and then whenever anything dies by Susano, it gets removed from the game. He does damage all forwards, so he will deal 9k damage to all of your forwards. So, you got to be careful with which forwards are out. You want to play Susano on a board that you either have 1 forward out that you don't care about getting removed, or if you don't have anything and your opponent is trying to push for game, you could essentially Susano and kill the board. But yeah, that's Susano, and that's all the forwards of the deck. For summons, we have 3 copies of Opus 24 Mateus. This is a burst. It's 2 cost. Has relevant text of you can choose one of the following 2. Either you choose a forward of 3 or less and break it, a dull forward of 3 or less and break it, or you just choose a forward, dull it, draw a card. Really nice. It pretty good again, like on a burst against like a Yuna deck from the new Opus 25 Light Yuna. So it could potentially break stuff that she wants to dull, or just dull them in general. Next up, we have 3 copies of Ama. It's auto cancels. If it cancels a forward, it kills it. It's essentially you want this card in your deck if you're playing fire at 3 copies always. Next up, we have our Opus 22 Shiva. I really like this card. So this card says all of the characters your opponent controls loses all of their abilities. If she was paid with backups, you draw a card as well. Don't really need to worry about that, but she is like a 3 cost, so you could feasibly do it. This card's really just good in general. Ice having a card that can blank stuff, or just blank your opponent's board on demand, their forwards, backups, and monsters. Really good against water. Good against, Yuna deck. Good against Raffia. Just to blank out stuff and then go. If you use this before playing a Lightning or, like another key piece, it's also really strong because at that point your opponent, like let's say you have 1 forward and you cast this, if your opponent responds to just you having the 1 forward and trying to get rid of it, who cares? You're playing Lightning that turn. And Lightning could change the game. So that's it's just a really neat card to have. Next up, we're going to have 3 copies of the Opus 19 starter deck. Bahamut. This card gets reduced by 3 if you have 3 or more 13 characters. So again, a synergy with Fang here, just having 13 characters out. He chooses a forward, deals it 10k. If it died to him, they get removed from the game. Really, really good, strong summon here. This essentially being a 2 cost is amazing. Literally just going, yeah, I'm going to 10k your Warrior of Light, the 4-color Warrior of Light, remove it from the game, or 10k your Raffia, remove it from the game, or like even 10k'ing a Yuna. Yes, they can sort of tax it, but again, if you're playing this for 2 and they tax it, you'll most likely have the CP to pay for the tax, and just not worry about it. And then again, you're removing the card from the game that you're killing with this, so they can't really recur it. But yeah, that's the 11 summons I'm running. You could always change this to, the way you want to see it. You don't have to run these exact 11. Next up is our backups. It's going to be 2 copies of Opus 1 Sarah. This just makes Snow untargetable by abilities. Really, again, really, really good, in general. Being untargetable by abilities hurts a lot of things, especially if Snow is like one of your only 2 forwards out. Again, and with this deck, you're most likely going to have somewhere between 4 to 5 forwards out most games, if not just 3, which 3 is enough to win you most games with this deck because it pushes for damage really fast. And your forwards get really big pretty fast. But yeah, Sarah just, making him untargetable is pretty nice. Next up, again, I'm playing 2 copies of Class 9th Moogle. This is the tap for wind for Arnold here, and that's basically it. We are playing 2 copies of Class 2nd Moogle. This is an optional pick. I'm playing it because it taps for ice, so if I see it, it is pretty nice. You don't have to play this at 2 copies. You can play it at 1, and then play, like, 3 Sarah. Personally, I like the 2. It's nice to see. But this also could just be 1 Class 2nd Moogle, and then you can play another Saz if you want. Or, like, another 13 backup if you really need. After that, we're playing 3 copies of Opus 1 Starter Deck Moogle. I believe this card's a Starter Deck card. But yeah, we're playing this guy basically to search, our 13 forwards. You need him at 3 copies in this deck. If you're playing a Fire Lightning variant, you play Lumina. She is basically the same card as this, 3 cost. She's a lightning backup that does the same exact thing. And then there is a lightning Mog 13-2 as well that can crack himself and search for a 13 forward. Or 13 character, I think. I don't really remember. But this card is just, your searcher. It's good. Next up, we are playing 2 copies of Moody. So Moody enters the field, you search for a fire summon, and when you cast a Bahamut, you will activate Moody. So this is just a search for your Amas and your Bahamuts. And then if you do end up casting a Bahamut while you have Moody out, he just reactivates. So again, if you're playing against like Yuna card, like the light Yuna, and they didn't freeze your Moody, or even if they did freeze the Moody and you just pitched from hand to play Bahamut, and let's say they didn't tax you for whatever reason, or they taxed you but you paid for it, you will activate the Moody, allowing you to just, do it. Like, you have the CP to do something else. Next up, 2 copies of Opus 21 Edgar. This just plays a 2-cost character when he enters the field. You can play backups, you can play forwards, you can play also monsters, and then he can crack himself and do the same thing. So this basically just gives your 2-drops flash, if we're talking in Magic the Gathering terms, or back attack from this game. But yeah, it just makes all of your 2-drops always live in your hand if you ever wanted to use them. I don't know if I mentioned, but this Moody is from Opus 11. Next up, we're playing the Opus 7 Saz backup. It's a burst that searches for a fire summon. If you hit this in damage, it's nice. You can grab a Bahamut to kill something, or the Ama to use. And then lastly, our last backup is going to be 2 copies of Opus 22 Emina. When she enters the field, you search for a 2-drop ice character. This is basically just to search for your backups, which is going to be Class 9th or Sarah. Either of the two. If you have Sarah in hand, you don't need to search for her. If you need you're always probably going to go for Class 9th because you want it for the null. But if you have him in hand, you can grab Sarah for your snow. And then LBs, again, LBs could be whatever you want. This is what I'm playing with. You don't have to play with this. You could also tech in 1 Matt here. Matt's pretty good because you're playing the Earth. You can use it. But yeah, probably the biggest one to note is going to be LB Snow. He can search for Lightning or Sarah. Again, if you don't see your starter deck Snow, the LB Snow is pretty nice. Being another way to search for Lightning and or the Sarah backup, because he just says card name. Lightning or Sarah is also really, really good. I would show other cards to play in the deck, but 13 deck is pretty much always going to be the same. Your main cards are literally just Fang, Lightning, and Vanille. If you're playing Wind, you play, the Opus 23 Hope and this Null. If you're playing Lightning, there's the starter deck Null, starter deck Hope, Lumina. It's just very much the decks are sort of samey. You're still playing these 3 cards. You're still probably going to be running like Mog, but yeah, this deck just really functions with just fast, aggressive, like aggro tools and things like that. Cheap bodies to play early on, ways to recur them, ways to stop your opponent. Most 13 decks play aggro with like 30, 34 forwards. Mines is like fire ice, sort of, so it's sort of control with aggro, so it's like a controlled aggro situation going on. But in that regard, let me just give you a quick test hand of what you'd expect from a 13 deck, or from this 13 deck in general. So, I'm going to shuffle the deck here. I'll probably just show 2 hands because this deck's not that difficult to learn. It's a very basic deck. It's simply just aggro. And here we drew into 2 Fangs, Moody, Edgar, and Mog. Really strong start. We have a way to search Lightning We have a way to make that lightning cost 1. Again, having Fang is just always good. And then we have the Edgar. So we'll draw our card. This is just fine. Turn 1, you would probably pitch for your class Moogle. So we can then play our Mog next turn. Here you could play the Fang, or you can hold if you choose to play Fang and they just let you leave it there. It's fine, you know. Next up, even perfect. We drew into the lightning. So now we have the option of, do we want to search for our Vanille, or let's say search for another, like, 13 card. We can just go, I'd probably just go Edgar here, play Edgar. Edgar plays lightning. Um, Again, this is pretty solid. You can play the Mog just to make the Fang effect go off. And then you would search, I would say search probably Vanille just to have the extra lightning in hand. Um, but here, we would go swing, everything gains 1k. Let's say they hit no bursts, and then swing again. That will draw you a card off of the lightning. And then here's the part where it gets really, really good. We drew into null. So if they don't deal with this, on their turn, and let's just let you keep it, and they try to develop backups, or they just play other cards, this is very freaking solid here. So we're gonna pitch the Terra, and then tap the class Moogle for ice to play Mog. That will now trigger, well, it doesn't trigger, but now Fang is giving everything 2k. I would suggest grabbing Null here, because now we're going to do the Fang action ability of making our next 13 forward cost 2 less, right? So you can do that as soon as you grab your Null. And then we'll pitch the Null, tap the Edgar to play Null. And now this is a very dangerous board. So Fang is going to be 7k, Lightning is 9k, and Null is 11k. Here I would suggest you just go to combat. You'll swing with the Lightning, give everything 1k. Lightning is swinging in 10k. If they don't hit a burst that can deal with her, they take a point of damage. Swing with the Null, another 1k, and you draw your card from Lightning. And then swing with the Fang, another 1k, draw your card, and then they'll take a point of damage. Good thing to know is they'll take the point of damage first via Lightning's effect, and then they'll take the point of damage from the attack, if not blocked. And then potentially now you're sitting at lethal. So, again, if they're playing an Earth deck, and they Shantoto your board on their turn, you're fine with that, right? You don't really mind, because of what we drew into. And this is why we sort of don't mind here, because we drew into our Vanille. So we would tap, pitch, play Vanille. We'd grab Lightning. And then, you play Lightning and swing, right? And then they most likely couldn't play anything if they played a Shantoto. If they were able to play something, you can still push them out, sort of. We would crack Edgar to play our Moogle that taps for wind. Let's say we paid for lightning, And, this is just very scary. It's very good. You don't mind trading with lightning either. It's whatever at that point. But yeah, this deck can be very fast, very dangerous. And I didn't even show off just like having the protection on snow or like any of the other funny, nuttier combos. Actually, let me show you like the real sauce combos. So like, let me give you the perfect like turn ones. We need Fire CP to cast. This is a deck that also just doesn't mind not having backups. Again, because it's just pretty safe. It's a pretty safe deck. Actually, let me rig this to yeah. So I'm gonna actually rig. So I'm gonna show you like the perfect starting hand. So the perfect starting hand would always be like these two in hand. But yeah, so we would, start our turn, draw a card. You would go play Fang, Fang effect, play Vanille, Vanille. You would grab Lightning here. You don't play Lightning just in case they're trying to use like they do a, I don't know, turn one Toto, or they start killing shit out. You don't really want to cast the Lightning here. You just want them to look at this board and be like, okay, well, I know they have Lightning in hand, and they have 2/13 bodies out. But if they don't do anything to this and they just like play backups, yeah, you win the game here. You would go Lightning, Warp, the Null, Combat. Null comes in, Lightning, swing, Vanille, swing, draw a card. Fang, swing, Lightning will deal a point of damage, draw a card. Null will swing, Lightning will deal a point of damage, and you draw a card. And then you're sitting at 4 cards in hand, 4 forwards. They took 4 point of damage. Granted, none of them were a burst that could stop this. And again, turn 1 is literally the scariest turn for this deck, because this deck can win right then and there. This deck can literally win out the gate. It could set up for its win con just super easily. And even then, even with like bad hands and stuff like that, this deck easily just gets out of those. Like once you get your Amina or like your Moogles, you can just pretty much fix your bad hands. Caius is a good fixer for bad hands. He'll play like a 3 or less, so he can play backups. He can play other forwards that do other things. So there's really no like downside to the 13 decks. I would say your worst thing is just like sort of getting petered out, getting Ahmad, getting killed and stuff like that. But yep, that'll be it for this video. This is going to be my 13 deck video again. If you guys liked it, please like, comment, and subscribe for more Final Fantasy deck videos. Till then, I'll see you guys later. Peace.